Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah.
Thank you very much for coming to ISKCON of Silicon Valley. In the Bhagavad-Gita, Kṛṣṇa in the 7th chapter says, Daivahi esha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya mameva ye prapadyante maya metam tarantite. Taranti means to cross over. And he begins by describing his illusory energy, which is mentioned in many places. The Vishnu Purana says, Vishnu Shakti Para Prokta Kshetra Gyakya Tata Para Avidya Karma Sangyangya Tritiya Shakti Rishite. This is that Kṛṣṇa has various kinds of energy. And in this verse from the Vishnu Purana, which Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu quoted once when he was teaching Sanatana Goswami about the science of Krishna consciousness, he described that there's an internal potency. This is the potency of the spiritual world. This is what Krishna says is his Sanatana Dharma, Sanatana Dhamma, the place that's eternal. It's not affected by time. And the material energy, which is symptomized by fruitive activities, that is, working in the material world by the force of karma to try to enjoy the fruits of one's labor, not by service, but by working selfishly. And this is the illusory world called the external world, or the world of Daivi Maya. And then there's another energy in the Lord's creation, which is called the Kshetragya Shakti. And this is the jiva, or the living entity, who is the same in quality with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as Krishna himself confirms in the Bhagavad-Gita. Mamai vamsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana manakshashtan indriyani prakriti stani karshati. Says that all the living beings that we see around us, including the plants, the animals, and humans, are all his fragmental parts and parcels. Just as much as if you were looking at a great fire, you would see sparks coming from that fire. And they're the same in quality as the fire, but they're not great like the fire is. And so Krishna says there in that verse that those living entities, then when they become associated with the external energy, they struggle very hard. Karshati means they work very hard, they grapple with the material energy. And in the first verse I quoted from the 7th chapter of the Gita, Daivahi esha gunamayi. He describes that the external energy called Daivi Maya, represented by Durga Devi. Of course, every one of you know that Durga means, Durgachati means difficult to go. It's hard to get from Google to here in less than 23 minutes, even though it's only 3.2 miles away at this time of night. And similarly, we move about this world at being controlled by the laws of karma. There's only so much you can do when you're constricted by the laws of karma because of your previous activities, momentum from your previous lives. And so Daivahi esha gunamayi, and there are these gunas. It's a characteristic of the material world. The three modalities of goodness, passion, and ignorance, or sattva, rajas, and tamas. These three modalities, through combinations and permutations, make up the various features of the whole material world, which Krishna describes later on in the 10th chapter of the Gita. He says that everyone, including the devas, are affected by these three modes of material nature, and that everything we see in this world is a product of these three modes of material nature. And then he says, Mama Maya Duratyaya. So Mama means mine, and Maya means the illusory potency. So it's his potency that we're dealing with. And it is daivi. It's divine because it comes from Kṛṣṇa. Nonetheless, we have no business in the material world. It's incompatible with our nature. And we become waylaid by the material nature, by the modes of material nature. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is giving a little more of a detailed description of this verse, the living entity in the material world is compared to be a merchant, a traveling merchant, somebody who's living a nice home life and then decides he wants to find wealth, goes off into the forest searching for some treasure, and then is lost. And lost in the forest, he's exposed to the elements. And each one of the elements, as described by Shukadeva Goswami in the Srimad Bhagavatam 5th canto, is one of the features of the material nature. Now, material nature has disturbing features. They're called adhyatmic, adhibhotic, and adhidaivik kleshas, or miseries. So adhyatmic means those miseries which are created by our own bodies and minds. Anyone? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, if you didn't raise your hand, you tell us what kind of diet you're on and how you do that. We'll be interested to hear. It's inevitable in the material world. In fact, it's impossible to get comfortable in your own body ultimately, because first of all, it's always changing. And second of all, because we're very subtle living entities, we're used to an uncommon type of beauty that can't be found in the material world. No matter how beautiful our material body happens to be now, it's never quite right. And even if it is stunningly beautiful, it starts to transform itself right before our eyes, and that's a source of trouble. Whatever kind of beautiful clothes you try to get, and there are lots of them you can try to get nowadays, there's always something that just doesn't come out right. And as somebody's buying a new piece of clothing, they're thinking about a different one and trading that one in. There's always an imbalance within the mind and within the body. This is called adhyatmic klesha. There's no way to actually get comfortable in the material world. There's the constant endeavor to try to get comfortable. There's the idea that you can get comfortable. For instance, nowadays, there are many different kinds of mattress stores. I've noticed this lately for some reason. There's the sleep number. Sleep number, I have no idea what it is, but I know it's high-tech, and it has something to do with finding your exact number that you need to be in a full slumber at night. And of course, when I was growing up, I was born in the 50s, grew up in the 60s and 70s, there were water beds, and that was supposed to be the most natural experience. I could never see it. It seemed like you were on the ocean or something like that. But there's the endeavor to find a place to sleep that will be very comfortable, and I'll find complete peace and happiness. But why then we need so many mattress stores? One should suffice if you could find it, but we're always looking in all the aspects of our life. So we have this adhyatmic klesha, or suffering within our own minds and bodies. And then adhidaivik means it's natural occurrences in the weather, and there are other kinds of ways in which this material nature moves against our will. For instance, right now, across the Midwest and maybe into the east, northeast, there's a cold spell which is freezing people. It's colder than the North Pole right now in Chicago and Wisconsin. And people are dying in the cold. They're being frozen to death. Lord Brahma, in his prayers for creative energy, you'll notice in the 2nd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, beautiful prayers that you can read again and again. From his perspective, he's thinking out of compassion. One of the features of the material world that he feels sorry for is that the living entities are exposed to blasting summers, freezing winters, and they can never quite get comfortable here in the material world. Except in California, of course, then everything's fine. Of course, then there's earthquakes, and this is the problem with the life in the material world, is the adhyatmic and the adhidaivik miseries. In any moment, some kind of natural disaster can come and wipe everything out. Especially here in California, we're sitting, hate to tell you, right on a huge fault line that geologists say is going to go off any second now. In geological time, it's overdue. So don't get too comfortable. Whatever you have, whatever you build, it will be shaken up. And then Adhyatmik, Adhibhautik. This is from other living entities. Now, there are other kinds of living entities who come into our life unsought. They give us free advice unsought. They give us, they ask us for money when we think we've saved enough and now we have to hand it over. There are people who bump into us. This is the most aggravating thing I've noticed in train stations. I was in a train station in South India, and it was a very muggy evening. It was 1979, South India, and somebody bumped into somebody else, and a big fight ensued right in the train station. Fists flying, everything. And I was thinking, how uncomfortable is this? And so wherever we go in the material world, the Shastras explain, we're going to find some Adhyatmik, Adhidaivik, Adhibhautik, Kṛṣṇa, and they'll either come one at a time, or two at a time, or all three at one time. But there's never a time when there's not one of the kleshas. And these actually come from Durga Devi herself. If you'll notice that she's riding on a tigress, when you drive into Vrindavan nowadays, there's this huge Durga Devi on a tigress, and she's holding her trishu with the 3 prongs on it. That represents Adhyatmik, Adhibhautik, and Adhidaivik. She has, of course, 10 arms. So if the living entity tries to get away, then she has many more hands where she can bring it back and poke them again and again. Of course, this is a selfless service. She's doing it to remind everyone here in this world that this is not your place. Of course, have you ever been sleeping and then something's bothering you, or you know you have to get up, but you just turn over and you keep sleeping, just try to ignore it? That's the material world in general. Everyone's being disturbed in various ways and poked, but then there's a way in which they go, oh, I'll just try to sleep it off and forget about it. This is called ignorance. So this is the trouble with the material world, and we need to be straightforward about it. It's part of the education process that Kṛṣṇa gives in the Bhagavad-Gita called Sambandha Gyan to inform us that the material world is not our home. If I think that I can make a happy settlement here in the material world, or I can find a place that will ultimately be my resting place, I'll retire early, I'll have enough money, and I'll find the perfect house or apartment in a little hamlet somewhere, and we'll live happily ever after. Happily ever after, H-E-A. It never actually happens. And it's something that we hear about in stories, and I used to hear it when I was a kid, when my father would read me stories, or my mother, and it would end with, and then they lived happily ever after. And I walk away thinking like, hey, wait a minute, how do they do that? Because doesn't everybody die in the end? And therefore, Kṛṣṇa is informing us here very plainly. As Mama Maya Duratyaya, you're in a situation that's Duratyaya. It's very difficult. It's a treacherous situation described in Srimad Bhagavatam, Padam Padam Yad Vipadam, that you're taking steps, but at any moment there could be a misstep. I was once on parikrama at Govardhan Hill, walking around by myself early in the morning, and I came to the stretch just past Uddhavakund on the way to Radhakund, and I was walking along chanting, and I was a little disturbed because a family came by on a flatbed rickshaw, and now they were all laughing. That's why I was a little bit disturbed, because I was trying to concentrate on my chanting and in sort of a sober mood. And I heard ha ha ha, ho ho ho, he he he, everyone laughing, all the kids. And then I saw why they were laughing, and that was because the father in the family was pedaling the rickshaw. The rickshawala was running behind, and all the kids and the man's wife were on the flatbed rickshaw. And so that was funny. And I kept my head down, I kept chanting, and then just 30 seconds later, the ha ha ha, ho ho ho, he turned into wailing. And I looked in front of me, it's just a flat area, except for there's a little ravine to the left. And I noticed they were gone. And I thought, how did that happen? They were gone. And then I noticed people running to the edge of the ravine and looking over. Of course, they weren't permanently injured, but they were pretty battered because the rickshaw had gone over the edge. And they all went rolling down the hill, and there were sticker bushes, representative of the life in the material world. Whatever kind of situation you have now, ha ha ha, ho ho ho, he, a minute later, padam padam yad vipadam, then you fall down the ravine and you're ensconced in a sticker bush. And this is a duratyaya. It's very difficult to live here without misery and suffering in the mind, from other living entities, from natural disturbances, and so on. Now comes the good news. That's the bad news. You want the good news? Yes. Well, Kṛṣṇa gives it over and over again. He says, ye mam eva ye prapadyante. So this is a very straightforward statement, he says. But those who surrender to me, prapadyante, mayam etam tarantite, can easily cross beyond the material nature. These sufferings can be transcended. But there's only one way that it can be done. You can't do it by science. For instance, science has eradicated many diseases, but now they're coming back. Because the material nature is relentless. There's not a time at which we could overcome all the diseases. In fact, if we were to start naming diseases, starting with A, how many could you come up with? Alzheimer's, AIDS, asthma, epilepsy's an E, but that's okay, we'll take it. Appendicitis. We have a lot of them, and I guarantee you that could go on for half an hour just with the A's. We get into the B's, botulism. Botulism. You can look it up. Anyway, the B's, the C's, the D's, there are probably even the Z's, and it goes on and on. There are enough ways in which we can fall prey to the material energy that you'll never adjust your way out of it through science. There's not a time at which through science you can replace all the parts and just keep on going. And even if you could, it would be very uncomfortable. So the material world is designed like that. Therefore, the solution is, Kṛṣṇa says here, to surrender to him. Ma'ameva ye prapadyante, mayam etam tarantite. So if we take a look together at the word meanings, daivi means transcendental. He, certainly, esha, this, gunamayi, consisting of the three modes of material nature. See, just like I said, mama, my, maya, energy, duratyaya, very, something, difficult to overcome, mam, unto me, eva, certainly, yea, those who prapadyante, surrender. So this is, someone might now ask, well, how do I surrender to Kṛṣṇa? Might you not ask that? After you're offered this way out of the material world, what do I have to do to surrender to Kṛṣṇa? So this is described by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There's a sixfold path of surrender. Actually, he calls it Sharnagati. Sharnagati means the way, the path of taking shelter. It's actually a much kinder, gentler word than surrender, because we think of surrendering our passport or surrendering to the FBI if they bang on your door at 6 a.m. in the morning. These ways of surrender seem a little severe, but it's actually called Sharnagati, or the sixfold path of taking shelter of Kṛṣṇa. So the first in the path of taking shelter of Kṛṣṇa is to accept those things that are favorable for serving Kṛṣṇa. So there's ways in which you can rearrange your life so that you're in a position to serve Kṛṣṇa more favorably. Some of those happen to do, and the most important of them are first of all, association. By having a good association, taking up good association means association with those who are serious about advancing in spiritual life. This is the foremost cause of advancement in spiritual life, and therefore it's considered very favorable. And the second of the path of, on the path of taking shelter of Kṛṣṇa is to give up those things that are unfavorable. So what would you say as a juxtaposition of the first one would be something that would be beneficial that you would give up that would help you to advance in devotional service? Give up bad association. See, it's easy. So get good association and then avoid bad association. And what's bad association? Well, in the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, Kṛṣṇa describes that there are various kinds of people who have a demoniac mentality. And that is, they think there's no God, they think that everything happened by chance, it's a combination of chemicals, and they also have qualities of deceitfulness and envy, anger, and so forth. But primarily those who don't believe that there is a supreme personality of Godhead. This is bad association. And those who do believe in the supreme personality of Godhead are good association and who are trying to reach Him. The third in the path of surrender is that one should consider that Kṛṣṇa is maintaining me. And you can understand that everything actually comes from Kṛṣṇa. And all forms of maintenance come from Kṛṣṇa. They don't necessarily come from your boss or from the company that you work for. They're fully dependent also on Kṛṣṇa. They're only a mask, and behind that mask is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Whatever income we're getting, Prahlad Maharaj says in his prayers in the 9th chapter of the 7th canto, whatever kind of maintenance I have in my life, actually ultimately it's coming from Kṛṣṇa. So one of the ways of developing the path of surrender, or advancing on the path of surrender, is to consider very carefully how is it I'm being maintained. For instance, even my body, as I'm sitting here now, is somehow or other being maintained. I'm undergoing the process of homeostasis. Somehow or other, my body is 98.6 right now. And how does that happen? How is it that I'm able to form words now? If the power of speech is taken away from me, I won't be able to say anything. I'm also maintained by Kṛṣṇa through intelligence. He gives me intelligence how to drive down the road so I don't get hit. And all the other living entities are being given intelligence in the same way. And also, one should consider in the path of surrender to Kṛṣṇa that I'm being protected by Kṛṣṇa only. That is, Mari Kṛṣṇa Rakhi Ke, Rakhi Kṛṣṇa Mari Ke. And that means, in Bengali, although not pronounced very well, where's there? Give her the microphone.
You actually did it very good.
Oh.
Mare Kṛṣṇa Rakhe Ke, Rakhe Kṛṣṇa Mare Ke.
Very good. So, if Kṛṣṇa wants to save me, then nobody can kill me. And if Kṛṣṇa wants to kill me, nobody can save me. And my friend Satyadev Prabhu, who worked in an ambulance for 20 years, used to come to our weekly classes at our home, and he'd always have a fresh story. The person who was supposed to have been killed lived. And the person who was supposed to live died. This is nothing you can predict in this world, and it is due to the unseen hand of providence, which is Kṛṣṇa's hand, ultimately. And therefore, it's a vast world in which we have no control at all. Although I think I'm a controller, I'm not actually a controller. And therefore, if I wisely consider that Kṛṣṇa is my maintainer and my protector, and adjust my life according to those principles, this is considered, or one who does this is considered to be on the path of surrender to Kṛṣṇa, or the path of taking shelter of Him. There's two more in the path of taking shelter of Kṛṣṇa. One is that one should always maintain humility. Always consider oneself to be helpless, meek and humble. And finally, one should consider that everything that I have belongs to Kṛṣṇa. And this is the easiest solution to all our problems. We talk about various economic systems. Nowadays, there's a big debate about healthcare in America. So some people have this sense that only rich people should have healthcare, everyone else should suffer and die. And other people have an idea that everybody should be afforded healthcare, and there's quite a bit of contention over these kinds of things. In America, the idea that we should distribute wealth equally to people is abhorrent because they have an independent spirit, and they think that we should be able to excel and dominate others and so forth. And the idea of socialism, for instance, or that everything's shared equally by people is very difficult to take from the Western point of view, the Americanized point of view. However, we can solve all these problems, Prabhupada writes in the Sri Upanishad, by understanding the simple fact that Kṛṣṇa owns everything. This is called the Ishavasya spirit. Ishavasyam idang sarvam yat kincha yat jagat yam jagat tena tek tena bhunjita magridha kasya swadanam. Since I flubbed that verse, let's hear it from the Pandit circle. Say it correctly.
Ishavasyamidam sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bhunjita mangrada kashisidvanam.
Translation, please.
Everything animate, is that one? No. Oh yeah.
Go ahead. Just belt it out there.
Okay. Everything animate or inanimate is owned by the Lord.
Within the universe.
Yeah, so therefore one should only accept his quota.
One thing set aside is everything animate and inanimate is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota, and one should not accept other things, doing well, to whom they belong. Okay, good. How do you go? This is the reality. And if one accepts reality that everything's controlled and owned by the Lord, then this solves the many problems of life, of thinking that I have to control things or organize things in a certain way so that I have more and other people have less, or so. This is the final point in the path of taking shelter of Kṛṣṇa. So there's 5 points to taking shelter. The first is accept those things favorable. Second is dump all those things that are unfavorable. Get rid of them. They won't help you. Third is consider Kṛṣṇa your maintainer exclusively. Fourth is to consider him your protector. Fifth is to always be humble. And sixth is to consider that Kṛṣṇa owns everything. He's the controller and he's the owner of everything in the universe. I don't own anything. That makes life simpler, doesn't it? Right. So that's sixfold path of surrender. So Kṛṣṇa says then, Maya metam, this illusory energy of mine, taranti, overcome te, by those who take to this path of surrender, which I've just mentioned, they can easily cross over the ocean of material nature, which is otherwise very troublesome and difficult to overcome. And now we'll just take a few reflections before we continue on. Means anything that you heard that stuck with you? Yes.
You were talking about how there's all different types of living entities, and that just reminded me of, I was watching a video from Radhanath Swami earlier, and he was talking about how he was invited to like a presidential thing where there was, like, it was for the United States, like the United States president was going to be there, and like it was all officials, and at the same time there was like there was so much security there, and in the sky there was like there was a bird, and he was just saying that the bird has no capacity of doing the same things the president has, but at the same time the president cannot fly freely like the bird. So he said God has made every being with a purpose, and he's put in I don't want to quote him wrong, but he said he's made every being with his own time, and everybody is there for a reason. And that went further on into when you were talking about everything comes from Kṛṣṇa. So we can see that Kṛṣṇa is creating everything, and including ourselves, and he's maintaining whatever little we have or whatever lot we have in our life. So
yes, nice points. Thank you very much. This is something Chaitanya Mahaprabhu pointed out to his followers just after he took sannyas and he went out wandering in the world, and his followers came with him. He asked them, "Did you bring anything with you?" And they said, "No, you didn't instruct us to bring anything." He said, "Very good, because I want you to observe how this world works." He said, "Notice that the Lord has filled up the universe with food and money, but every living entity can only get according to their quota of what they deserve." And then he gave the example. He said, an emperor, he's supposed to get an emperor's feast every day. Well, that's easy for him. But one day he gets a high fever, so he can't eat. That's his karma. Another day the feast comes, but he becomes angry at his enemies, and he becomes so furious, he said, "Oh, take it away, I can't eat." And Prabhupada used to say that no matter how wealthy a person is, that he can only eat as many chapatis as he has capacity for. So you become a millionaire, you eat 4 chapatis. Then you become a billionaire, you can only eat 4 chapatis. You become as, what is this fellow from Amazon? Now he's called a zillionaire, and they don't do in billions anymore, they call zillion. There is no zillion, I know, but that's what they call him in an article I read. But he can only eat 4 chapatis. So what is the difference? And this is the limiting factor of the material nature. Every living entity gets according to what they deserve. Yes?
Guru Maharaj, you said we should accept everything that's favorable for devotional service and neglect everything that's not.
Yes. That's true. And if you look at the circumstances in your life and the things you have, there are many manuals written about how to reorganize your space, aren't there? You can read books, you can read articles, blogs, how to reorganize your space so it's more efficient. This is the Kṛṣṇa conscious instruction of how to organize your space. Get rid of those things that are not favorable for devotional service and keep only those things that are favorable. It's one way to sift through your possessions and see which one should I keep and which ones should I get rid of. Yes. Yes, Vaisesika.
It's good to remember about those 3 kinds of sufferings, Adhyatma, Adhidaiva, and Adhibhautika. That helps because when someone is trying hard to make himself, herself comfortable in this area, in this material world, but eventually when you remember that it's not possible at all, ultimately it's not possible, so it gives some relief. Maybe there is some point that that's some point that I can stop here and stop trying to go.
Yes, if you'll notice the many types of medicines, balms, ointments, drinks, any store that you go into, you'll find that there are hundreds, thousands of cures for many types of things. Not necessarily they're cures, but they're meant to stave off the discomfort of the material world. If you look at the markets and remember in the terms of Adhyatmik, Adhibhautik, and Adhidaivik, the kinds of things that are available, you'll notice that they're really related to how to try to stave off the suffering in the material body. And therefore, a life which is centered around these kinds of endeavors, simply how to try to make oneself more comfortable. Once I was talking to Satyadev Prabhu and I was saying that actually, everyone's just trying to enjoy in the material world. And he said, actually, they're spending more time trying not to suffer than trying to actually enjoy. Because if Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I get a moment where I'm not completely harassed by the material nature, I take that as happiness. And he gave an example of how kings used to torture people. They would take a board and they would tie the person to the board and then they'd dunk him in the water. Of course, our modern American administration has been doing this recently too. But they would dunk somebody in the river, and then when they were just out of breath, about to drown, then they'd bring them up for a second. And then the person takes the breath, and in that one breath you think, oh, this is happiness. So in a similar way, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, the happiness in the material world is only a very brief reprieve from the onslaught of suffering, and I take that as happiness. But that's different from actual happiness, which has to do with my spiritual existence and a relationship with Kṛṣṇa. Other reflections? Yes.
We have Vaikunt Nayak Prabhu from
Vaikuntha
India.
Nayaka, checking in from Mysore.
Dandavats Guru Maharaj, I like the point on Kṛṣṇa being the maintainer. The company boss are all just masks. You give the example of how the body is at the right temperature. The power of speech and intelligence comes from Kṛṣṇa. I was reminded of a documentary called Nature's IQ, which shows several examples of some complex intelligence in bird species that enables the birds to survive. Your servant Vaikunt Nayak Das.
Yes, Jesus was purported to have said that look at the birds in the field and notice how they're being maintained. And anyone can do this. Just take time even around your Google or Intel or Apple campus or whichever startup you happen to be with. And you can see that there are living entities who are living outside. I always notice this about animals. They live outside. It's like, what are you doing out here? You don't have a house. And they just find some place to hang out. And if you ask them, like, how are you guys eating out here? It's like, we just find stuff. It's just out here. There's things hanging from the trees, and there's things under these leaves here. And they know where they are. They're already provided by nature a way to get them. They have little hooks on their, feet that they're built in custom. They get them just like that. And, some of them they can smell from miles away. They can see, like the vultures, they fly so high, they can see a dead body from miles away from up there. It's naturally given. So this is something we can observe and actually learn from and remember the principle. And then Shraddha, you had more? A question from the internet.
This is coming from Facebook, from Bhakt Ankit in New York.
Oh, Bhakta Ankit.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj, for the wonderful
Specializes in solar, PhD in solar.
Wow. Thank you, Guru Maharaj, for the wonderful class. My question is, when one surrenders, these threefold miseries still continue to exist. So when you mention that we are able to overcome them, does that mean that we get power to tolerate them? Because the path of surrender gradually gives us higher tastes, and through that we are able to overcome the effects of these miseries on us. It looks like ultimately it's our mind who perceives these miseries, and it is also the mind which is also experiencing these higher tastes. So is it the mind which is getting the power to tolerate when we surrender? And here's one more question. One at a time.
Yes. Actually, yeah, okay, yes.
Guru Maharaj, my second question is, the sixfold path of surrender, as mentioned, are humility, dedication of the self, acceptance of the Lord as one's only maintainer, faith that Kṛṣṇa will surely protect, execution of only those acts favorable to pure devotion, and renunciation of conduct adverse to pure devotion. These sixfold paths can be practiced to come to the point of perfect surrender. However, out of these six, except for the fourth one, which is faith that Kṛṣṇa will surely protect, doesn't seem to be coming from just practice but experience also. Can you please elaborate on this point?
It helps to hear. Hearing is very important because there's a natural default condition I have in this world, or position that I take, and that is to try to get comfortable in the material world. And minus hearing, my senses, my mind go back into that endeavor to get comfortable in the material world. However, if you hear Bhagavad-Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam daily, you'll be dispelled of the idea that you can be happy in the material world. Even on the most subtle levels, the Bhagavatam explains it. In fact, you'll find, as Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out, that many of the stories in the Bhagavatam, as an example, are about kings. Now, of course, nowadays everybody lives like a king, especially here in Silicon Valley, because we have indoor heating, plumbing, we have Amazon Prime. Whatever you have, these are unimaginable amenities, what to speak of cellular technology and all these kinds of things that everybody has. But kings in days of yore had everything, and other people had very simple life. And then the Bhagavatam goes into great detail about how these great kings went through various kinds of miseries, reversals of fortune, through which they could not even enjoy the vast amounts of wealth and comfort that they had in their lives. Because, for instance, Chitraketu Maharaj, although he had everything, he was such a wealthy person, he had many, many wives, but he couldn't have a son. So that was a cause for great consternation for him. And then finally, when he did get a son, the son was murdered. And then it was worse. And the only path out of that was to take shelter of his gurus, Narada Muni and Gira Rishis. So the Bhagavatam is something that we have to hear regularly. In fact, I was just reading the other day about Brihaspati had a disciple. He got annoyed with the disciple unnecessarily. He cursed him, and then this disciple cursed Brihaspati. And there was a whole brouhaha over this. And Prabhupada mentioned something really stuck in my mind, and that is that even if you do the right thing in this material world, you can still become caught up in karma and reactions, even in the best of circumstances. He said, therefore, everyone should always act sagaciously in all circumstances. Whether the circumstances are good or bad, you should still be sagacious. And somebody can look up that word. It means to act like a sage, really. So you have to be very careful as you're moving through the material world, because there's a subtle energy here. And even if you try to do everything right, like King Nriga, he was another king. King Nriga had a perfect, he thought, performance of karmakanda, which means he followed the Vedic system perfectly, and he was the most famous giver of charity in the world. He gave away billions and billions of the most beautiful cows decorated with golden ornaments and jewels to the most qualified brahmanas. And then he made a mistake. Anybody here ever make a mistake? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Humans make mistakes, that's what we do. And he made a mistake, and he had to suffer for it greatly. So the ways of the material world are very subtle, and there are many reversals of fortune even when we don't expect it. There was one more from Shraddha, and then Shamalangi. Finished there. Okay, Shamalangi? Sagacious means wise. Where does it come from?
From Latin. Sagix, which means wise.
Sagix means wise. Okay.
So we talked about...
Be a sage. Page by page. Okay, go ahead.
So we just heard about, Rakhe Kṛṣṇa Mare Kṛṣṇa
Yes.
Rakhe Ke. So I just remembered a pastime in Chaitanya Charitamrita about for Gopinath Patanayak. When I think he owed some money to the government and he didn't pay, he kind of misused some funds, and the prince, he found that, and he was very annoyed, and he was like, I think he was supposed to be hanged or whatever. He was supposed to be killed, and just before he was getting killed, all the devotees of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would request him, please save him because he's Ramananda Rai's brother. And he externally seemed to, not get into those kinds of things. And he said, of course, how can it be the king's mistake when he actually owed money? So that's not the king's mistake. But actually, when he was about to be killed, at that point, somehow King Prataparudra came to know, and he ordered that no, he should be saved. And in fact, he kind of got a higher position or something. And then Gopinath Patnaik realized that mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he was about to die, but at that point, the mercy of Krishna, he just lived. So I just remembered that.
Yes. The author points out at the end of the story, which is actually, it's kind of a funny story in a way, because Gopinath Patnaik did owe money to the king. The prince went to collect it on behalf of the king, and Gopinath Patnaik was happy to pay it back, so he brought some fine horses that he had, and he offered them to the prince for a fair price. But then the prince, who had a tic, and he would constantly look up at the sky like that, he offered him a very low price for these fine horses. And Gopinath Patnaik said that these horses are certainly worth much more than that, because they don't go like this. And the prince became so angry that he had Gopinath Patnaik arrested and put up on the chunga. And the chunga is this high platform underneath which were swords which were sticking up from the ground. And the implication was at some point he would be pushed off if he didn't pay off his debt, and he would land upon the swords and be impaled. And of course, you told us the whole story so beautifully. I just threw in a couple of details. But at the end, when Gopinath Patnaik was rescued, and he was given a wrapper that indicated that he was even in a higher position than he had been before. His salary was doubled. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of course, told him, he said, don't mess around with the king's money anymore. He said, the king is a representative of God, so you should not take the king's money. But then he said, he didn't say, but Kaviraj Goswami says this is the unseen mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His energies work even though Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not actively get involved in helping Gopinath Patnaik. All these things took place automatically by his internal workings. So the moral of the story, you tell us. What is your main point that you'd like to make?
So the main point is, of course, if Krishna wants, nobody can, do any harm to you. But the end also, I think Gopinath Patnaik tells Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that, the actual mercy you have shown to Ramananda Roy and I think his brother Vaninath Roy, because they are totally free from material desires while I still have. So I want that kind of mercy to me rather than all these other things.
Yes. And of course he went on chanting Hare Krishna despite the fact that he was put on the chunga. And this is the life of a devotee. Yes, Prabhu. We'll get you a mic, don't worry. No, we have a free microphone service here.
Works. Thank you, Maharaj, for the beautiful explanation. My question is, Maya works on everyone, right? We try to be humble, but we make mistakes.
A little more volume on that, please.
We all know that Maya works in strange ways. We try to be humble, we try to live a very spiritual existence, but we still make mistakes or end up making mistakes even by mistake. We make the mistakes. So my question is, we all know that these mistakes will lead to the reactions, the reactions of the karma that we are doing. Then what is Sri Krishna trying to teach us by making us make mistakes and then repenting for them or suffering the karma from them?
Right. the whole material world is cosmic sensitivity training. So actually we're meant to come to the most refined condition of life, which is our actual happiness. And the material world is a constant reminder to us, and by the way, it's our own voluntary involvement with it in which we get entangled and through which we suffer that induces the reaction. Kṛṣṇa describes this in the Gita, he says, Nakartritvam nakarmani lokasya srijati prabhu, that I'm not responsible for the karma, it's the living entity's interaction with it. And it's not that we don't have any responsibility, we do, because we're not dead stones, we have free will to interact. And when we come to that realization that I'm the cause of my suffering because of my misusing my free will, then I can amend my ways and surrender to Kṛṣṇa. So it is Kṛṣṇa's mercy when we encounter suffering in this world, it's actually purifying. And you'll notice this when people suffer after they enjoy, and that's the nature of the material world. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu described this as bhoga tyaga. This is the way the pendulum swings here in this world. First, there's enjoyment of the material world. Possible? You try to enjoy? Possible, right? Okay. Then after enjoyment comes suffering. It's the opposite side of it. You always come from enjoyment, then you come to the suffering side. And so when we learn the lesson, how these two things are connected, and we begin to inquire what is the real purpose of life and how to get out of suffering, this is the beginning of human life. One should ask, why am I suffering, and what is the ultimate cure for suffering? This is an intelligent question, because mudhas, Krishna's words, he describes those who just go on stoically in taking the misery of the material world without trying to figure out why they're suffering. These are like the beasts of burden that carry around great weight, and they accept a little bit of grass at the end of the day. Well, grass is available everywhere, and they never inquire about the purpose of life. So it's a good question to ask, why am I suffering? And the answer is because I'm in a material body. That's the answer. And the ultimate reason that I'm suffering, there is one cause to all suffering in the material world. But we've run out of time, so I can't tell you what it is. The one cause for suffering in the material world is called vikarma, or sin. It means going against our actual eternal nature and benefit. It means turning away from our own self-interest. As it said in Bhagavatam, bhayam dvitiya binibeshatasya ishad apetasya viparyayosmitihi. That the reason that I'm fearful and the reason that I'm suffering is because I've turned my attention away from Bhagavan, away from my service to Kṛṣṇa, and therefore I suffer. And the cure is to turn back in the other direction, turn toward Kṛṣṇa, and take shelter of him. Now, Rupa Goswami says all of the kleshas, they come from sinful activity. That's their origin. And when we take to devotional service, the process of devotional service is described in the Padma Purana, apararabdha palam paptam kutam bijam palon mukham kramenaiva praliyante vishnu bhakti ratatmanam. This means that we are suffering because of many different stages of sinful reaction. There's prarabdha, which is the fully manifest karma that I'm due in this particular lifetime. It's not all my karma, but it's as much as I can suffer and enjoy in this one compact period of a short life that I have. And then there are kuta bija, which means there are more subtle forms of karma that are about to appear in our life in the future. And these are concomitant. They go on forever. They never stop until one takes to Vishnu Bhakti. Vishnu Bhakti Ratatmana means that when I surrender to Krishna, then that karmic reaction is stopped. You no longer have karma. So then someone might ask the question, hey, wait a minute, devotees, they surrender to Krishna, but they're still suffering in the material world. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur answers this question. We can see if you turn on the screen to the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 14th chapter, verse number 8. That's 10:14:8. For those of you who are keeping score at home. And in this verse, Krishna is saying that the devotee tolerates suffering because he knows that it's actually Krishna's mercy upon him. Look at the translation. My dear Lord, says Brahma, one who earnestly waits for you to bestow your causeless mercy upon him, all the while patiently suffering the reactions of his past misdeeds and offering you respectful obeisances with his heart, words, and body, is surely eligible for liberation, for it has become his rightful claim. And here's your purport for the night. Srila Sridhar Swami explains in his commentary that just as a legitimate son has to simply remain alive to gain an inheritance from his father, one who simply remains alive in Krishna consciousness, following the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga, automatically becomes eligible to receive the mercy of the personality of Godhead. In other words, he will be promoted to the kingdom of God. The word susamikshmana indicates that a devotee earnestly awaits the mercy of the Supreme Lord even while suffering the painful effects of previous sinful activities. Lord Krishna explains in the Bhagavad-Gita that a devotee who fully surrenders unto him is no longer liable to suffer the reactions of his previous karma. However, because in his mind a devotee may still maintain the remnants of his previous sinful mentality, the Lord removes the last vestiges of the enjoying spirit by giving his devotee punishments that may sometimes resemble sinful reactions. The purpose of the entire creation of God is to rectify the living entity's tendency to enjoy without the Lord, and therefore the particular punishment given for a sinful activity is specifically designed to curtail the mentality that produced the activity. Although a devotee has surrendered to the Lord's devotional service, until he is completely perfect in Krishna consciousness, he may maintain a slight inclination to enjoy the false happiness of this world. The Lord therefore creates a particular situation to eradicate this remaining enjoying spirit. This unhappiness suffered by a sincere devotee is not technically a karmic reaction. It is rather the Lord's special mercy for inducing his devotee to completely let go of the material world and return home back to Godhead. A sincere devotee, good, right? Yes. You feel happy? Yes. A sincere devotee earnestly desires to go back to the Lord's abode. Therefore, he willingly accepts the Lord's merciful punishment and continues offering respects and obeisances to the Lord with his heart, words, and body. Such a bona fide servant of the Lord, considering all hardship a small price to pay for gaining the personal association of the Lord, certainly becomes a legitimate son of God, as indicated here by the words Daya Bhak. Just as one cannot approach the sun without becoming fire, one cannot approach the Supreme Lord, Lord Krishna, without undergoing a rigid purificatory process which may appear like suffering, but which is in fact a curative treatment administered by the personal hand of the Lord. I rest my case. Yeah, let's hear for Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Lord Brahma. This is if you're going to live by a verse in the Bhagavatam, this is the verse to live by. Because if you live by this verse, then Dhaya Sadhya Bhak, it means you inherit the kingdom of God. This is the way of the surrendered soul, to take shelter of Krishna. Yes, Priya Kishori, all the way in left field.
I was
was reflecting on this verse, the purport of this verse, and how you were earlier mentioning about the attitude of helplessness. And when you tell a common materialistic person who may not know about Krishna consciousness to feel helpless, it seems like a very pitiable condition. But when you see that this helplessness is actually stemming from the knowledge that Krishna is putting you through certain circumstances to help you learn, it feels like that's a very smart decision to make.
Smart indeed. And we notice also that the great liberated acharyas, those who are uttama adhikaris on the highest level of devotional service, actually relish this mood of taking full shelter of Krishna and feeling themselves completely dependent and fallen. This is counterintuitive to the materialistic mind that I'm independent, that I'll arrange for my own enjoyment. But those who are actually advanced, they relish being helpless. They relish being fallen and express themselves as such. And there's a deep enjoyment. You had a question a long time ago, or a point. Prabhu, the good Mridanga player there, with the microphone in your hand. Go ahead.
Prabhu. Actually...
Hold that really close, though, okay?
Yeah.
Even closer. See how I do like this? There. It's for people online. They can hear more clearly.
Right, no, absolutely. I was going to actually mention that lately I've been thinking about the whole process of what true happiness to me is, and a lot of it came clear to me with this verse. And there's one thing I wanted to sort of point out, and I'd love to get your opinion on it as well, is especially like I'm in an environment where I'm surrounded by a lot of people, and I noticed that for me, I started to really question what happiness was, because we all go through our ups and downs. And one day I was able to sort of like, for me, kind of break it down to how I view happiness, whether it be extrinsic or sort of like intrinsic. And what I mean by that is, I noticed that, if so-and-so, my expectations from the outside world were met, I was happy. Or if I sort of, got the validation that I was seeking, then I was happy. Or if I was, hoping that I would, this is the grades I wanted to get in this test, I was happy. But if all those extrinsic conditions weren't met, then I would get into my head and start to like, let's say, just overanalyze. And then one day when I was chanting the name, it came to me that when I go within myself and not let all these extrinsic factors get into the way, but just serve Krishna within myself, I'm happy, and that happiness is far more lasting than any of the other happinesses, because if those conditions from the outside world are not met, then I'm always chasing that, and it's never ending. If that sort of makes sense. So where I'm going with this is, I realized that when we sort of put our basis in the outside world, and we put all our confidence in all these people who are sort of always going to let us down because we are flawed at the end of the day, but if I was able to put all that confidence in a higher power who is Krishna, he's never going to let me down. And that's the fine distinction I came into being, and this verse sort of like cleared it up. In a more sensical fashion, if that makes sense.
I think you're on to something. Yeah, that was very, very well put. I think it was so well articulated that what I can do is offer more evidence to support your position, because it's a very sensible and accurate assessment of what happiness actually is. And so, if we could turn to the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, the verse Shaknoti Haivaya Shodhum Praksharira Vimokshanat. Which verse is that? 22? 23. That's 523. And there are several verses in this chapter which describe intrinsic, extrinsic happiness. So in this verse, Krishna describes what is, you see the last two words in this shloka, Sukhi Nara? Sounds Japanese, right? It's Sanskrit. It's not Japanese, but it means happy human. Nara is a human being, and Sukhi, as you all know, better than me, means happiness. So Sukhinara. So what he's saying here, Shaknoti haivaya shodhum praksharira vimokshanat. If before you give up this body, you're able to withstand the forces of desire and anger, you become a happy human. Kama krodod bhavam vegam. So vegams means the forces of desire and anger. So the translation here is that before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is well situated in his happiness world. Go to the next verse, 24. And there we find Yonta sukhontararamas. Here's intrinsic happiness. Tatantar jyotirevya sayogi brahmanirvanam brahma bhuto dikashchati. And the translation is, one whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and he ultimately attains the Supreme. And we'll read Prabhupada's purport, which says, unless one is able to relish happiness from within, how can one retire from the external engagements meant for deriving superficial happiness? A liberated person enjoys happiness by factual experience. He can, therefore, sit silently in any place and enjoy the activities of life from within. Such a liberated person no longer desires external material happiness. This state is called Brahma Bhuta, attaining which one is assured of going back home, back to Godhead. Also in the second chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, when Arjuna asked Kṛṣṇa, what does it mean to be steady in consciousness? And furthermore, he asked, what is the symptom of somebody who has attained this kind of inner happiness that you're describing? And he says, Prajahati yadakaman sarvam parta manogatan atman yeva manatushta stita pragna stadochate. Stita pragna stadochate. A person is said to be in this fixed consciousness, enjoying the intrinsic happiness, when such a person has sloughed off or really forgotten about or is not enticed by the external happiness of the world. And so he describes it, Shaknoti haivaya, he says, Prajahati, he gives up. Prajahati yada kama, and all kinds of desires that are produced by the mind. Sarvan parta manogatan. So the mind's always producing these ideas, and we heard about it earlier that this idea of happiness is actually being manufactured in the mind. It's a little factory up here, or wherever it is. And it's got a little conveyor belt coming out, and on it are all these ideas about what's going to make me actually happy. But a person who's fixed in consciousness, Prajahati, he's like, none of this will actually make me happy. I'm not interested in it anymore. He doesn't identify with it as being relevant in his life. That's described also in the which chapter is it? Naiva kinchit karomiti, 5th chapter. Naiva kinchit karomiti yukto manyete tatvivit pashan shinvan shpisanjigran ajan gachan span. Okay, start over. I'm sorry. Naiva kinchit karomiti yukta manyete tatvivit pashyan shinvan shvasanjigran ashnan gachan shvapanshasan pralapan vishrinan grinan unmritan rapi indriya nindriyati shivartata ititarayan. So this verse that I just mangled says that whatever a person is doing externally, a self-realized person, he's in divine consciousness, he makes no identification with the external workings of the mind. So what's being described here is he's seeing, he's moving about, he's evacuating, he's accepting things, he's going to Google, he's driving, sitting in traffic, and all these things, and he's realizing that these things are going on automatically around me, but I actually have nothing to do with them. Nothing at all to do with them. Naiva kinchit, nothing. Karomiti, all these movings of the external world. So he doesn't identify at all with the extrinsic world. What to speak of the happiness, so-called happiness, he understands as Krishna says again in the 5th chapter, Yehi sam, see if I can get this one, Yehi samsparshacha poka tuka yonaya evate adyantavanta konteya nate shuramate Buddha. An intelligent person, a self-realized person, is one who sees that my interaction with the external world, the tactile experience that I'm having that we sometimes call happiness, is actually the source of my distress. Dukkha yona evite means that dukkha comes from the womb of my endeavor to enjoy the material world. So he stays away from it. He's not attracted to it at all. Thank you for your presentation, though. It was very well done. I see a big future for you, teaching Krishna consciousness all over the world. It's just my... Thank you, Prabhu. Yes. Right behind you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
So a point came up regarding our employers being the mask and the maintainer being the Kṛṣṇa. So I was thinking about that point, and I felt that there are devatas, the demigods, who are maintaining us through Kṛṣṇa. Kṛṣṇa is ultimately the giver of the power to the demigods. But they are maintaining us. They are responsible for the supply of water, heat, etc. So to our material employers, we work, most of us, 40 hours a week to serve them, even though they are just a via medium. I was wondering, as also is the notion of Deva Rin in Vedic culture, there are many kind of debts to the parents, forefathers, rishis. So this is the concept of Deva Rin. So my question is, as a sadhaka practicing Krishna consciousness, how can we liquidate our debt to the demigods for all the gifts that they are giving us as a service to Krishna? Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for such a nice question. Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, Devarshi Bhutatnan Nrinam Pitrinam Nakinkoronayam Nranicha Rajan Sarvatmanaya Sharanam Sharanyam Kato Mukundam Parihritakartam. This means that if one is fully engaged in the surrender process to Mukunda, then Deva, Rishi, Bhuta, Apta, there are many different living entities that we're rini, where we owe them something, naturally. But Sarvatmana, ya Sharanam Sharanyam, Kato Mukundam Prihritakartam, that debt is liquidated when one is fully surrendered to Krishna. So those who have entered into the process of devotional service directly take shelter of Krishna and his promise in the Bhagavad-Gita, Sarvadharman Parityaja, Mamikam Sharanam Raja. Don't worry about all kinds of other ways of paying everybody off. Just put it all here. Surrender to me completely. Krishna is the source, as you mentioned, of all the demigods. Even he says in the Bhagavad-Gita that if someone develops faith in a demigod, that's even coming from me. Shariya, I'm not going to try too many more verses tonight. I'm just not feeling it. Okay, so that's the answer. However, there are qualifying statements in the Bhagavatam, for instance, 11th canto, Tavat karmana kurvita na nirvidyeta yavata matkata shavanadova shavayanan yavan najayate. Meaning that until you come to the stage of being completely attached to Krishna Kata, then you should carefully follow the external rules until you come to that stage. But actually self-realized people are careful to follow external rules anyway, because they want to set an example for other people, how they should act properly. But in no way are the devotees who are fully engaged in serving Krishna, chanting Hare Krishna, dissuaded from doing that. In other words, they don't take to inferior duties by trying to appease demigods or pay them back in other ways. They're advised, and they take to simply surrender to Krishna and keep their consciousness fixed on him. And now we're going to try that ourselves right after Govinda makes his point by chanting Hare Krishna, which is the Yuga Dharma.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, actually on this point, I just one verse came to my mind that yada yam anugrahanati bhagwan atma bhavitah sajahati matim loke vedecha parinishtitam. Right, so one who, it's kind of continuation of your point, that one who is really favored by Lord, that person transcends the worldly thinking, and also even what the Vedic way of thinking of ritual and way of life. Sajahati Kaman. So that's all I wanted to say.
Yes, so one should therefore stick to the path of Sharanagati, surrender to Kṛṣṇa. Kṛṣṇa himself assures us in the end of the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, what is it? No, at the end of the 8th chapter then, I'm sorry. Attaining the Supreme. Vedeshu yagyeshu tapasu chaiva dhaneshu yat punya palam pratishtam adyeti tat sarvavidam vaditva yogi param stanam upaiti chadyam. He said, a person who's a yogi, a bhakti yogi, surrendering to Kṛṣṇa, is not bereft of the results of giving in charity, of studying the Vedic literature, of performing all kinds of sacrifices and so on. He attains everything simply by the process of devotional service. Therefore, take to bhakti and fully surrender to Kṛṣṇa. You can do it by following the sixfold path of surrender. And don't put your faith in the material world, because it will let you down every single time. Don't try to get comfortable here. Just try to find a balance in your devotional practice and the other aspects of your life, so that you can live out your life in practicing devotional service and maintain a modicum of strength and a healthy, balanced mind. Is that a fair solution to some of our problems in the world? Okay. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Gopremanande. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming to ISKCON of Silicon Valley and for joining us online from various parts around the world. We felt your presence here online, and to all of you who braved the dark and came through all the traffic, we deeply appreciate you being here. It's changed our lives, and we'll do this again and again as long as Kṛṣṇa allows us.
Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, hey, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman.